Hi, I'm Dee with Modesty Matters. We're a business dedicated to providing products for modest-minded families. Today I'm going to teach you how to make our A-line dress. This is the most simple of all of our dresses and a great place to start if you're a beginning seamstress. First, you're going to print off your pattern, and I'd like to show you briefly how we go about laying it out. And what we will do is lay them out like this so that we're able to see through and line up words. For instance, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 pattern pieces in this bodice. We're going to look through and we're going to see at times our Modest Sue little design peeking through the paper or words, and just be careful to line it up as best you can. Okay, here we have it lined up. Now it may seem like a little bit of work up front, but believe me, you're going to have such a sturdy pattern piece when you're all done. It's going to be much sturdier than any tissue pattern piece that you'll have. It'll last much longer. Okay, here we have our pattern all taped together, and we're ready to cut out the size that we need. We're going to begin with our lining material. As I lay out our lining material, I want to show you that we're going to stay away from this, which is called the selvage. It's a little bit harder. Sometimes it's discolored. We just don't want that in our dress. I'll show you what I'm going to do because we're going to cut out the back and the front at the same time. So I'm going to fold this way over here like this. And note, now I have a fold placed toward us. Our material is completely doubled. In fact, we have 4 layers of material right now. But our fold right here is actually doubled. So I'm going to take our bodice piece and I'm going to lay it on the fold right here, and I'm going to pin that in place, and then we're going to cut out just like this all the way around, but not this part right here that says do not cut. Now when we do this, we're cutting out the front and the back of our bodice piece at the same time. Now we have our bodice piece pinned onto our lining fabric, and we're going to come back and we're going to cut it out right along here. Okay, notice I cut all the way around, but I did not cut right here where it says do not cut and fold. We'll take our pins out, and because we're going to use this pattern piece for our primary fabric also. Alright, now we have our primary material out. We're going to use our bodice piece again. And this time we need to watch our material because this material is directional. In other words, the flowers go up. So we want to make sure that our bodice is going to have our flowers pointing up in it. Now, as you notice, our bodice piece has an arrow on it. That's going to help you line up your material underneath. Again, I'm going to fold this over. I have my selvage here, and I have my fold over here. I'm going to lay our bodice piece on the fold, just like this, and I'm going to pin it in place, and then we're going to cut it out. Now that I have our bodice piece laid out, I'm also going to lay out our sleeve piece. Now our sleeve piece also has the arrow on it, and it also says do not cut, fold over. So I'm going to lay that on our fold as well. Okay, now remember, the way that I've laid this out, I've put it on the double material. So we're going to be cutting out both sleeves at the same time. We're also cutting out both the front and the back of the bodice at the same time. Okay, now we've cut both of our pattern pieces out. I'm going to remove our pins. Okay, now I'm going to cut out the tiebacks. They're going to be 3 inches wide, and they are going to be the width of our material going this way. Now if you have a rotary cutter and a self-healing mat, you might want to use that. It's nice and it's very quick. I love to use it. If you don't have a rotary cutter, it's fine. Just take your ruler and mark off 3 inches with a pencil, and then cut it out with your scissors. Okay, we have our A-line skirt pattern now. Now this is 12 or more pieces, and it's going to take you a little bit of time to tape it together, but don't lose heart, you will have a pattern for a very long time. We're going to lay it on the fold. I've got the fold right here to me, the selvage way over here. We're going to pin it in place, and we're simply going to cut all the way around here. But not along this that says place on fold, do not cut. We're now going to start with our 2 cutout bodice pieces. As you can see, we have our fabric piece and we have our lining piece right here. What we're going to do is put those right sides together. And when I say right sides together, I mean the pretty side together. Just like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pin all 4 shoulders together. And we're going to come back and we're going to put a straight stitch right across here. Okay, now I've pinned together all of our shoulders, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a straight stitch right across all 4 shoulders. Alright, what I want to be sure and show you is anytime you're sewing, you'll generally line up the edge of your material with this right back here that says 5/8. That's a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and it's what you'll usually use when you're sewing. Now I take this lever here and put it down, and that puts a presser foot down, come way over here to the edge, and I turn this knob, and that's going to put down your needle. So this is called the needle down position, and that's how we're going to begin our sewing every time. Take the pins out. You don't want to sew over pins. Pins are going to break your needle. So I go forward, I stop, I go reverse, and then I go forward again, and that locks that stitch in place. It gives us a very secure beginning and ending to all of our seams. We're going to do the same thing on all 4 shoulders. Okay, here's the seam we just put in, right here. The beginning and the end of each seam has been doubled. What we're going to do now is open up our piece, and we are going to open up these seams and press them open just like this. Now I'm pressing these open, and we're going to do the same thing on all 4 of the shoulder seams. Now that I've pressed open all these seams, we're going to lay our pieces right sides together, and I'm going to pin them at the shoulder seams and all the way around our neck. But especially we want to make sure we have this shoulder seam, these shoulder seams lined up. Okay, now that I've pinned all the way around our neckline, starting at our shoulder seams, I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to do, again, a straight stitch at 5/8 inch. And I'll show you. Okay, again, I am lined up with the 5/8 inch mark and I'm starting in the needle down position. And when I start a seam like this, I always start behind a shoulder seam. Go forward, reverse, and I take my pins out as I go. Now make sure that you go slow enough to have full control of your fabric. And this is the hand position I always use. You have a lot of control as you go around. You'll have one hand to the side guiding the material and another hand right here steadying the material. If ever you feel like you're not in control of the material, just simply stop and slow down. You don't have to go as fast as I do. I come to the end of that seam and I back up and I go forward again, locking that again in place, raising my needle, and I just simply pull this out and clip those threads. Okay, now I've sewn all the way around our neckline at 5/8 inch. Now the next thing we're going to have to do, because we have some drastic curves here, is come back and put notches in, because we're going to turn this and we want it to lay nicely. So you'll need to do this any time that you have serious curves, like in this case. Now you want to be very careful as you're putting these notches in that you don't cut through the seam that you put in just now. If that happens, you'll have to go back to the machine and you'll have to reinforce it again. So be very careful. Alright, it might be a little bit time consuming, but we've notched all the way around the neck on the curves. The next thing we're going to do is turn our piece right side out, and we're going to want to iron that neckline in place. Okay, now as I begin to press this neckline out, I want to show you something I always do. I always make sure that I can just see the primary material peeking out on the lining side. That way I know my lining is not showing on the other side. You see it's just barely peeking out, barely. And I'm going to press that neckline all the way around, just like that. Okay, we have pressed our neckline in place and it turned out beautiful, and that's because you took the time to put those notches in. Let me show you, just tiny bit of the primary fabric is peeking out on this side, and that's what we want because we don't want that lining to show on this side. Let's go on to the sleeves. We're going to take our sleeve pieces now, and conveniently we already have a fold here so we know exactly where the center of that sleeve is. We're going to line that up with the shoulder seam. We're going to put right sides together and we're going to pin it in place right there. So now what I do is I pin this in the center right here where our seam is, and I take the edge of our sleeve and I pull it all the way over here and I pin it right there. Now what I'm going to show you today, ladies and girls, is a gathered sleeve. I'm going to have a very, very cute dress with some gathering right at our shoulders. Now, don't be afraid, you can do this. Now I smooth it down, smooth along here, just like this, and I pin it in place. I'm going to smooth right along here, lining up those raw edges. Now what I want to show you that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little slide ruler, I'm going to set it at 1.5 inches, And from this pin right here, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches over, smoothing from this pin on. 1.5 inches over, I'm going to put a pin right here, and I'm going to leave this flap. I'm going to leave a flap right here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. 1.5 inches from our center pin. I'm going to pin it and leave this flap. Let me show you again. We are pinned here. It's smooth, smooth. We have a flap. We have a center pin. We have a flap. And then it's smooth and smooth all the way around to that where that underarm seam will eventually be. I'm going to go over and pin the other sleeve on exactly the same way. I'm going to line up the center of the sleeve with that shoulder seam. I'm going to pin it in place right there. I'm going to come over, I'm going to take the edge of this and I'm going to line it up right here, pin that in place. Okay, line that up right with that edge, our raw edges together, and I'm going to smooth this along here, pinning it as I go, smoothing it up. Now I'm going to measure this from the center seam 1.5 inches, and I'm going to put a pin there. Now let me show you. That's going to leave a big flap of material right there, and that's what we want. So we're smooth, 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 and a flap of material. We're going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to line this up, pin that in place right there. Smooth that along, those raw edges. Continue to smooth that along and pin that in place. Find our 1.5 inches from that center shoulder seam. And here we have it. We have our sleeve ready to sew. It is smooth, 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 a flap, our center pin, a flap, and then it is smooth all the way down. All right, I'm starting with our needle down position, and I'm lining our material up with a 5/8 inch mark. I'm going to sew forward, I'm going to sew backwards and lock that stitch in place. Now right now we're just sewing along the smooth part of our material and removing our pins as we go. Starting right here, we're going to lift our presser foot and we're going to do something called finger gathering. Just with our fingers, we are going to gather that flap and put these little pleats here. Lowering the presser foot again, and we're going to go forward very slowly, securing those gathers in place. This is a very simple way to gather. And here we'll do the same thing on this side, raising that presser foot, and just with our fingers gathering. Very slowly, securing those gathers in place. Okay, the rest of the way now we get to sew on smooth fabric and finish our sleeve. Now since we want to have nice, neat, finished seams, we're going to either use a zigzag stitch or a serger. In our case, of course, a zigzag stitch. We're going to take it and we're going to go right along the edge. Okay, here we have it. Now we're going to do the same thing for the other sleeve. All right, now we have our bodice to this point. We are going to take out those tiebacks that we cut out before. I'm going to cut that little salvage piece off. And I'm going to fold it right in half, just like this, and I'm going to do a straight stitch right down the edge. Alright, in my needle down position, I'm going to straight stitch. This time I'm not lining it up with the 5/8 inch, but I'm lining it up with the edge of our presser foot. And forward and backwards. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to gusset our tie back. We've sewn all the way along that edge. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to open that seam up, and I'm going to press it flat right in the middle. Alright, we're in needle down position, and I'm going to go forward at 5/8 inch, stop and go back, and go forward again. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other end. With our needle down, we're going to stitch forward and stop, and go in reverse, and then go forward again. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this piece and we're going to cut it exactly in half, just like this. So we have our two tiebacks. Now we need to turn them though. What I like to use is just a plain old dowel rod. You can use a pencil or anything else that'll work for you. But this is the sewn end, and I push it into itself. Push it all the way down. Then we scoot it up a bit and grab that end. I'm going to pull it off just like that. All right, here we have our two gusseted tiebacks pressed down nicely and ready to put on our bodice. Okay, we're going to put our gusseted tiebacks onto our bodice now. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to put it right in the seam. So we're going to go up 1 inch from the bottom of our bodice, and right along that raw edge there we're going to pin that in place. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're doing this the seam side down here. Alright, we're going to line this up with the edge of the presser foot. We're not going to line it up with the 5/8 inch mark. We're going to just do a straight stitch right along here, and this is called basting. We're just going to baste that in place. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright, our tiebacks are secured in place over here just by a basting stitch, and I've just pinned them right here to keep them out of any future sewing that we're doing. I'm going to turn our pieces right sides together, and I'm going to line up our underarm seam right here. Pin it, come down and take our raw edges, line them up and pin those. And then our arm, our sleeve, pin that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now for our side seam, we line it back up again with the 5/8 inch mark. I'm going to go forward, reverse. Now watch carefully as I sew over this. I am catching that tie back in my seam. Alright, here's my 5/8 inch straight stitch down the side of our bodice, and as you can see I caught that tie back in the seam, so that's going to be a really nice and secure seam where that tie back is. We're going to take it back to the machine now, and we're going to finish the edge of this seam also with a zigzag stitch right along the edge. Alright, here's our zigzag stitch, and we're going to do the same thing along the other side of our bodice. I've done a zigzag stitch right along the edge. Let's turn our piece now so you can see it. Here we have it. We have a beautiful bodice. It's a nice tie back. Now I'm going to show you how to hem our sleeve. I'm going to do a 1/2 inch rolled hem on our sleeve. And what that means is I'm going to fold it up one time at a 1/2 inch. I'm going to press that little area that I just folded up, and I'm going to fold it up again another 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to pin it in place, and I'm going to move on to the next section. I'm going to do the same thing. And this is how we're going to hem our sleeves, both of them. Okay, now that I have pressed our rolled hem at a 1/2 inch and pinned it in place, we're going to stitch it down with a straight stitch. This time we're pretty much lined up with the left edge of our presser foot. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, on the other sleeve. Alright, here's our rolled hem on our sleeve. 1/2 inch and pinned in place and then straight stitched. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other sleeve. The next thing we're going to do now is take out our A-line skirt that we cut out earlier. With right sides together, just like this. See, our right sides together. We're going to simply pin the sides together and take this to the machine and stitch it. Alright, now that we have pinned together both of those sides, we're going to take this to the machine and we are going to straight stitch down each side with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to come back and we're going to zigzag right along the edge to finish those seams. Starting in needle down position, go forward, reverse, and just like our other seams, we're going to go all the way to the end. Now we'll finish those edges with the zigzag stitch. Here you can see our finished seams. Alright, now we're going to take our skirt that we just stitched and we're going to take our bodice piece and we are going to put them right sides together. I'm going to open up the skirt, I'm going to insert the bodice piece just like this, and I'm going to take this and line up our side seams right here, and of course pin those in place. Come over to the other side and do the same thing. So now that we've done those side seams, we can just simply go back and pin our bodice and our skirt in place right along this waistband. And there you have it. We're going to take this to the machine now. We're going to straight stitch at 5/8 inch this right along here all the way around, and then we'll come back and we will zigzag stitch to finish that. Okay, again, we're in the needle down position, and I want to point out that because we have been so careful to follow the 5/8 inch seam allowance, our skirt and our bodice fit together perfectly. Now that fit together perfectly all the way around. Now I'm going to come right out here and I'm going to do a zigzag stitch to finish that edge. Here we have a beautiful finished waist seam all the way around. I'm going to turn it now. I'm going to show you how nice this is going to lay on the other side. Even before it's ironed in place. It just lays so nice and smoothly all the way around, and our ties are securely in place. Okay, the last thing we need to do is our hem. Because this is a rounded skirt, we're going to do a rolled hem. To do that, I'm going to set my slide ruler at 3/8 inch, and I'm going to press gently that in place. I'll come back and I'll fold it again on itself, just like this. See, basically rolling that up. I'm going to press that again, and then I'm going to pin it in place. Now I'm going to do the same thing all the way around the bottom of this skirt. We begin with our needle down, and we're going to follow with a straight stitch this fold that we created all the way around our skirt. We have finished our dress now. What a beautiful A-line dress. Join us at ModestyMatters.net for more great products and projects.